Hey everyone, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com, and I'm here today with another 1/6 scale model review for the 1/6 scale Browning M2HB MG set from ZY Toys. This here is a set that I've been wanting to go ahead and do a review on for quite some time because, well, I often recommend this set over here in my other 1/6 scale Browning accessory and cradle mount videos. For those who don't know, on the ECA catalog, I have several accessories and cradle mounts for the Browning M2HB, and those sets are designed for use on vehicles of one flavor or another, and for the weapon of choice, the kit of choice I should say, is either the Dragon M2HB or the ZY Toys M2HB. Well, here I have one of the examples of the ZY Toys right here in the shop for us to do a proper review on. The ZY Toys M2HB is a set that's actually been on the market longer than I even originally remembered. These sets here were originally released by this company back in the year 2012. And here we are at the time filming this in 2024. Obviously, it's been over 10 years. Having said that, however, for the longest period of time, these things were still fairly prolific and easily come by on various online retailers. Be it from eBay, well, eBay is definitely the most popular. And I'm pretty sure you may have been able to track one of these down on some of the action figure accessory e-tailers and possibly even on AliExpress. But either way, these sets have been on the market now for a little while, and these sets are actually fairly affordable, retailing anywhere from about 20 to about 30 US dollars, if memory, a little hazy here, but that's what I can remember from seeing these things online from back in the day. The sets are fully assembled, so you have everything ready to go out of the box for your action figure display, and they were offered in two patterns. We had this one here, which is just the standard black variant, but there was also another pattern of this same unit that had a camouflage scheme on it. Outside of that, the tooling is identical, and so are the accessories that are supplied with the sets, and we'll be going over that in this video when I crack the box open. As for this set over here, this was something that, again, I wasn't really anticipating ever to have in my hand, but as it turns out, I have a loyal viewer out there that had a bunch of stuff that he was looking to get rid of, and he essentially just gave it all to me, and in the gigantic pile of stuff, several of the ZY Toys M2s were included. So if you're watching this out there, again, you have my utmost respect and thanks, and my deepest appreciation. Which, again, I'm returning the favor to all of you watching so you can see reviews like this here. Okay, so back to the MG. Like I've stated in several of my other 50 cal videos, even though this unit here is produced by ZY Toys, the tooling, in fact, is not originally from them and is, in fact, Dragon. You see, Dragon designed the M2HB that we have here several years before this one here made its debut in 2012. We rewind our clocks back to the year 2001 or so. Dragon went ahead and released at the time a modern U.S. infantry figure, and he was a machine gunner and came with a Browning M2HB. The MG set was only released in a build form at that time and was only supplied with that figure, which is interesting because of all of the other weapon sets, or I should say with all the other action figures that Dragon released as time went on, they never released a M2 gunner in a World War II or even Korean War format. The only time it was ever released by Dragon in a build form was, again, for that Operation Enduring Freedom figure that was produced at that time. Fast forward our clocks to, again, about 2010 or so, Dragon would re-release their M2HB set, but their unit would be produced as an unassembled plastic kit. Essentially, it's literally nothing more than the exact same model that we have here, just not built and painted, and you get it on the runners. Those sets I have, again, mentioned in great detail on this channel in the past, and I do have a few more of those models on hand. At some point, I will also bring them on table for a proper review, but that remains to be seen. For this one here, we're just going to stick with the ZY Toys variant. It's also interesting to point out that since the 2010 timeframe, Dragon has yet to release their M2 in a built or kit format. And basically, if you find one in kit form, it's just left over new old stock from the original batch that were produced in the early 2010s time frame. As for the ZY Toy ones, again, I thought that these things were still in production, but I believe that production on them has also ceased, and what's on the market is currently on the market. But a large number of these things were produced, and for the longest period of time, they were fairly easily come by, like I mentioned earlier. So with all that out of the way, let's now actually focus on the unit that we have here. Starting with the box art and graphic design, here we have a quite handsome looking appearance where we have a photograph of the model in question. It is deployed with its ammo belt present as well as with its open ammo can. We also have here the font M2HB. I like the little silhouette that they did over there. It's a nice touch. And we also have a little bit of smoke for good measure. Here we have the ZY Toys logo. I'm not really sure if the website is even still in existence or not. I'm just filming this on the fly, so I'll definitely probably check up on that after the filming of this scene. For anyone who's interested, this is item number ZY8031A. Right here, this is the black version, of course. If this was the camoed one, the box art was identical, but the picture here was the one with the camo pattern, and we had a little graphic over here that said camo. Continuing with the graphic design, we have here the copyright info. Copyright 2012, ZY Toys Corp. Again, it is made in China. ZY Toys is a Chinese-based company. On this side here, we have a nice little warning hazard telling people not to eat any of the parts in here. It's a model of an MG, not a snack. We have here another shot of the item number, and on this side here we also have just some info. Nice little barcode for good measure, as well as, again, that same graphic about the unit's color. On this one here, we also have a nice little image on the back, and here you can see what the unit here contains, being the black version, and also the camoed variant. The camo was just this pattern here. There was just one type of camo, which appears to be a desert camo of one sort or another. And you can see the graphic there telling you that. Okay, so to open it up, it is a top opening box, as you can see. And if anyone, by the way, has seen the other ZY Toys weapon review that I did on this channel about a year or so ago, where I did the M240 Bravo, this here should look very similar. In fact, like I mentioned in that video, the M240 Bravo was another model built on Dragon tooling. For good measure, as again, Dragon tooling was actually pretty good. So with the cover off, you had a better view of everything. We do have this protective plastic section over here, which is going to be glare if I pivot it. But as you can see, it does a phenomenal job in keeping everything nice and protected and factory fresh. To look at it further though, I am going to have to go ahead and take this off. Carefully just peel this out of the box. I do like the way that you can actually put the unit back into its packaging in case you want to store it or keep it dust proof. And that is something that can be done, unlike some of the other weapon sets that were released in the past from other manufacturers, where they're in a blister pack and you rip it open and now you get access to the part, but you can't reseal it. This one over here, they had that mindset in mind. The piece though is still factory fresh, as it is held together with a little piece of scotch tape on either end. Also on the side, so I'm just going to go in here with my really crusty looking steak knife and open this up. As you can see, this unit is still 100% factory fresh, so it's really cool to have the experience on opening up with the rest of you. Okay, so that's all taken care of. Let's go ahead and pop this guy open. So starting with the M2HB itself, as you can see, it is pre-assembled from the get-go. There are no small little parts that need to be added, like the charging handle or the sights or anything like that. You literally just pop it out of the packaging and it's ready for mounting. We'll go ahead and set this aside. I'll go into more on this in a moment. The next largest item in the packaging is the tripod that we have right here. It is in its folded state. The unit is fully detailed where you can actually deploy it or render it in the collapsed state like we have here. And if anyone has ever opened up a M2 tripod before, this should look very familiar. On the front leg over here, it's really nice that it has a fastener holding it in place. This makes it nice and tight. On some other weapon sets out there of this type of pattern, The weakest link is this section over here, as with the weight of the MG. On some examples, it can droop, but with this one over here, it has that nice, satisfying clicking noise, and the fastener does a good job with doing that. You can adjust it to the proper height that you desire, just like the real one. Also, this guy here has some sort of an adjustable leg, again, as per the real one, and so are the ones on the tail. We'll see what that looks like momentarily. Also supplied with the set is some kind of an extender pintle. I believe this may be something so you can install it onto a vehicle. It's like a quick and dirty way on doing it. It's definitely incorrect for most vehicle usage, but I'll go into that more in a moment. But as you see, you get two pieces. You get the bottom socket here, and you get the top socket with this nice little handle that is fully pivotable, which is a nice touch. Set that aside. We have here a TO&E mount right there. Doesn't appear to be functional. It's just molded in its state that we have here. But it is nicely detailed nonetheless. And again, we'll circle back to that as the video goes on. We have here a 50 cal ammo can. It's very nicely rendered out. It's fully functional. And we got some other stuff here on the inside, which is interesting to point out. I have no idea what it is at this time, but we'll see as the video continues. The last thing we have here is an ammo belt, and this is probably one of the model strong points. And it is really, really nice. As for why, well, as they say in media or on the news, more at 11. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's go ahead and bring the stuff in closer so we get a better look at it. The first thing we're going to start with is the ammo belt. So the ammo belt is nice on this unit because it is actually an all-metal belt. And what I mean by all-metal is just that. The ammunition themselves are made out of CNC'd brass, and the links are representing the disintegrating pattern of link, which of course will be appropriate for an M2. They did have cloth ones, but this one here is representing the more common disintegrating link, and they are quite literally real disintegrating links. If you pop these rounds out, the links will just fall apart like the real one. So it's a very nice touch. The ammo themselves are not painted, so it's all left in its El Natural brass coloring, which is fine for the projectiles, or I should say for the casings, but the projectiles would need to be painted if you wanted to really polish it up past this point here. But for basic display, as what most people tend to use these for, the stock belt is actually quite excellent. The next thing to talk about is the ammo can. So the ammo can is replicating a post-World War II, or I should say a modern era ammo can, which again makes sense because this set was designed by Dragon, again for use with their, at the time, modern infantry figure. Ammo cans are not all created equally. The World War II ones had a very distinctive shape to them. Then after World War II, designs were altered, and they still kept on changing design up until the last 30 or so years, or 40 years at this point, and that's the type of can that's still in production today. We'll circle back on that. I do have some real ammo cans here, and I could use as reference. But the piece is fully functional. I like the little spot welds over here. On the real one, this would actually be used to hold a inner frame in place. It has a rubber gasket, which seals the internals off from the external environment. The handle is nice in that it is actually a real handle, where we have the two little metal clips over here, and the piece just kind of floats on the middle section. The hinge is fairly frail, but that's common for 1/6 scale MG ammo cans. The latch itself is a piece of metal. It's all bent to shape. It does have mostly the correct shape and appearance for this pattern of ammo can. I like the metal work here for the hinge, and I also like the little metal grab handle that we have right here on the side. The information here on the info looks pretty good. To my eyes, it looks pretty good, or I should say it looks accurate. On the ZY Toys M240 Bravo, there was something funky going on with the ammo can, and I actually go into that in more depth in that video. There is no bottom detailing. I like the color. The color is also very nice. It's on par with NATO green, which would again be appropriate for a modern 50 cal ammo can. Opening it up, first I'm going to dump all these little metal bits out. Okay, so opening up, we do have some interior detailing over here. We have a false floor, and it has some molded ammunition in this section. Admittedly, not the strong suit of this set, where even the pieces, even though they are somewhat properly detailed, the way they are painted and rendered really leaves some room for improvement. Like, for instance, the links are just painted in brass. Obviously, they would be black, like we have right here. The purpose of having the false floor is so that when you have the belt spooled up like this here, it gives you the illusion that you have 100 rounds, as opposed to just this little segment here. So that's why they did it. I'll also go into a little bit of detail later on exactly why, or the big difference between the ZY Toys and the Dragon. There is a difference in this regard, and again, I'll go over that in a moment. Okay, so the things that came out of the ammo can are these little, they look like Allen wrenches, but there's some kind of a locking lever. If I didn't know any better, I think they're for the tripod, and we'll get to that in a second. So, on that note, let's get to the tripod. So here we have the tripod. Again, it's a American pattern of M2 tripod, or I believe it might be called the M3 tripod. I'm a little hazy on that. It's been a while since I handled one of these. But anyway, the tripod itself, again, folds up just like the real one, where this piece here is actuating. It slides up and down the stem. On the real one here, this would be a spring-loaded latch, and it would actually clip into place right here, thus keeping its shape. On this one here, that's not the case, and it's just purely for looks, but the piece is nice and sturdy, and it's not very flimsy where it will collapse on you. To retract, you just pull this guy down, and now the guy folds up. On the bottom portion over here, we have the feet, and on the real one, these legs here would be able to extend further like this here. I like there's a little groove on the bottom. This makes it so that the piece can't pivot on you, and it can always stay, or only stay, in the correct position as it goes in and out. On the real one, again, this little tensioner here would, or I should say this guy would clip this guy in place in the transport mode, then you would hit this little latch and it'll allow you to pull it open. As for these little latches, they would be for these little fittings over here, and you would tighten them down like a hose clamp, and that would put some tension on this, keeping at the height that, or the length that you desire. On this one here, though, they are totally just for looks and are non-functional. But that is an interesting feature, that you do have the ability to adjust the length of the tripod legs. As for the one here on the front, same exact thing as I mentioned before. You can adjust it. Only this one here, it's a bit flimsy in that if you try to extend it like this, obviously it's going to either fall out, or when you put the MG in place, the weight's just going to push down. If you want to adjust the front, you're probably going to have to add a little drop of glue just for some extra tension. Going back to these little clips here, they appear to be made out of plastic. I don't think they are made out of metal. And these guys, again, just go into these locations like you see. You may need to do some hand fitting in order to get the piece to fit in properly. But as you can see, I wiggled them in, and for the most part, if you're just in a bind and you don't have any sort of tooling, you could easily just do what I did, and for the most part, be okay. But if I was, I definitely recommend having a pin vise with a small Dremel bit and opening up the tolerances of these guys slightly so the piece can slide in better, and also a little drop of super glue can help. To complete the tripod further, here we have the T&E mount, and by the way, I just realized I may have referred to this a couple scenes back as a TO&E mount, and if I did, that's incorrect. It's T&E mount, transverse and elevation. TO&E are bumper ID codes on vehicles. So if I said that earlier, my mistake. Sometimes something like that happens, specifically when you're just going off of memory. Anyway, so here's the real unit. On the real one here, this would be a spring-loaded latch, and it would tighten down on this section over here and keeping it in place. That's not going to be the case on this model. Also, on this one here, you can spin this left and right, and this will go in up and down, as will this entire section here, and this is how you can gradually adjust the height of the rear portion of the receiver so that the thing is at a constant setting. So the unit itself, again, it's all pre-painted in this gunmetal type coloring, which is okay. The real units would be either Parkerized or they would be some kind of a blued finish, depending on how old the unit actually is. Generally, you see these, they are more of a matte black type color, and then the edges would get all abrased and scratched up, giving you for the weathered looks that you generally see on my builds. But as for an out-of-the-box version, it's pretty good for what it is, and the color is more than suffice for most people out there. The detailing, again, is nice and crisp. We have here the charging handle detailing right there. The charging handle, admittedly, is could be improved with the paintwork. They just painted the whole piece flat black. The real one here, only the grip section would be black, while the metal sections would be the same color of the unit itself. And as for the grips, like I always say in these videos, there are more, like a plethora type of options, from wood to Bakelite to, on later versions, ABS. It just depends on the era that your M2 is representing. For World War II, you can actually go with the black ones like we have here. It's perfectly suffices. Again, black Bakelite was used during World War II. So let's look at the unit's features. Okay, so we'll start from the muzzle section. As you can see, we have the section over here. It is drilled out. It's molded hollow, I should say. They did add a little bit of airbrushing over here for powder fouling, which is excellent. This is something I do on my own build. The powder fouling isn't overly egregious and is more than appropriate for this type of a setup, specifically if it's fired a few rounds. Here we have the center portion here of the carry handle. On the M2HB, the entire barrel is removable for use, so you could change it to swap it out for a cool one if it overheats. But more than likely, it's actually done for transit reasons, because lugging this thing around, it's quite long and it's a bit cumbersome. The barrel has a carry handle right over here. The section that we have here is like a heat shield that contains the hinge equipment that holds the handle in place. It is perforated on the real ones, made out of thin sheet metal, and the Dragon unit, or in this case ZY unit, is rendered pretty well. On the carry handle itself, it's got the appropriate shape. However, one thing that the ZY Toys is missing that was present on the Dragon is the little handle that we have right here that would be in the wire. So what we have here is just a bent piece of wire. However, if you look at the real M2 carry handle, there would be this little roller that's in this section over here. It's a small little tube, and this allows you to grasp onto this piece, and the piece can pivot like this in that type of a manner. As for the geometry of the piece, it's a bit squared off, as you can see. However, when you look at these things, they tend to have a more rounded type appearance, and that is a slight ding on the Dragon and ZY Toys counterpart. However, there may or may not be versions out there that have a more boxy shape. Hard to tell. A lot of manufacturers produce these things over the years, but if you ever look at photographs of the real ones, specifically from the World War II time frame, they tend to be more rounder in appearance. Either way, the carry handle is a very nice touch, and it's an iconic bit of detailing for the M2. Speaking of iconic detailing, this takes us to the cooling shroud. So as you can see, it is just your standard M2 with the front section over here with the round vents. Quite typically seen, these are the types that would be the most produced and utilized. And what you see is what you get. Here we have the tripod version of the yoke. Simple and sweet. It is held in place with this fastener that we have right here. To remove, you actually have to yank out this bolt, and then the yoke falls off, and then you could then mount this to a cradle mount of your choice. But the detailing is pretty nice. It's good for what it is. On the back section over here, we have the mounts for the T&E mount. And it would connect to this little hole right over here. The piece would just plug into it, like so. And you'll see what it looks like momentarily when I have the unit set up. What is missing is some chain work. You can see there's this large eyelet over here, and there would be some chain in these sections over here for the retention pins. And that is absent on this set over here. One thing that I like that is offered, however, admittedly, the geometry is not exactly where it needs to be, is the shell ejection port. The Browning system, be it the 1919, 1917, or in this case the M2, is bottom eject. So this area here would actually be open. However, with the way Dragon designed the kit over here, we just have this nice little oval section as opposed to the whole piece being a large cavernous opening. So that is, again, a ding on the kit, but again, it's more than suffice, specifically if you're going to be mounting it in a cradle, where this section here is essentially basically all covered up. The little oval cutout does the job just fine. But I'm being a honest reviewer here, so that is something that I do want to mention. On some of the other versions on the market, for instance, they were just completely left solid. Like the Did one, for instance, which is, in my opinion, probably one of the worst examples of an M2HB in 1/6 scale. But it's made out of metal, so that means it's better. Not really. Okay, so moving back, takes us to the side section here of the receiver detailing. What you see is what you get. The detailing is pretty good. I like the rivets over here on the reinforcement sections for the bottom and top portions of the receiver. We've got that little lever right over there. The unit is hollow through and through and has a little special feature I'll go over in a moment. And on the reverse side here, you can see the section where the links would be ejecting from. I like all the detailing of the pin work and all that's all present, as is the feed paw detailing, which you'll see once I pop open the top cover, which, yes, is functional. The side panel over here, being a standard production M2HB, does have a reinforcement plate. This was something that was added after the 1920s or 1930s time frame in order to add a bit more structure to this area, specifically when they designed this version of the cocking handle or the charging handle that needs to ratchet downward on this lug over here to give a little bit of extra leverage so that you could actually rack this thing. And the original M2s didn't have that. But when they designed this ratchet system, they have this large plate over here as a reinforcement. The piece is appropriately detailed with the correct scallops in these sections here, and again, it's very nicely detailed. So that's it for the side. Let's go to the rear section where we have the spade grips. The fastener details that hold everything together is all present. It looks really good. The only thing that is missing are the two little holes that we have here on the top portions and bottom portions of the fasteners that hold the spades in place. There would be these two little holes for, I believe, where you can sit in a wrench of some sort in order to screw these pieces together. Those are missing on the Dragon and ZY tooling. We have here the butterfly assembly. Excellent detailing. Does the part quite well. As is the large, someone's going to kill me out there if I get this wrong. I believe this is the buffer spring assembly. And I know if you twist it, I think you can lock it up or make it semi. It's been a while since I handled an M2, but it's one or the other. Either way, all the detailing is present and it looks a dead ringer to the real one. So on the top portion here, we do have the sight. This is a peep/ladder sight. It's a peep sight in the folded down state, and then you could flip this guy up here and he becomes a ladder sight like so. I like the way they did the paintwork where you actually have the graduations painted in white. That's a nice little feature. The peep, however, is molded solid, as you can see, but if you have a pin vise with a small bit, you can make short work of that. The front sight's also very nicely detailed with the large protective hood over the, I believe it would be a barleycorn type sight on the inside. We have the top portion of the receiver here. This is a optic rail. You can mount some kind of an optic. Now, I'm not talking about a Picatinny rail. They did have a dovetail type optic system where you could drop in a optic or some kind of a device of one flavor or another. This was used in World War II and it also was used post-World War II. And in the following decades, specifically when PIC rails came about, you do see sometimes they have PIC rail adapters for this section here, where you can put on EOTech and a bunch of other stuff. Okay, and this takes us to the top cover. Nicely detailed. You have that large iconic nub right over there. And then we have this little locking latch here. We would twist this on the real one, and then this guy here would pop open. The guy is hinged, as you can see, and you can see it has the feed mechanism right here for the belt. Everything is all there, and it looks absolutely killer. On this section over here, we have the feed paw mechanism, like I mentioned before, and we have the bolt carrier. Note the camming surfaces are all present, as is that little round plate there, which on the real unit's used to switch between left and right hand feed, if desired. That's one nice little trick the M2 does have. For the infantry version that we have here, it just feeds in from the left-hand side. Also, the Dragon unit, and this also carried over into the ZY Toys one, had a functional charging handle, and it is spring-bound. If you look in here, you can see a little spring. And this is one of my favorite features on these. You can actually rack the thing. The bolt and charging handle are all connected as one piece, so when you actuate one, the whole piece does actuate in unison, which is a nice touch. No, the ratchet system does not work, sadly. That would be cool if they could do that, but for just basic handling, this one here works fine. And it is fun to play with. Specifically on an M2, because you always have to do it twice before you shoot the thing. So with the features out of the way, I do see some things that stick out to me. The first thing is there are some slight seam lines. And this, of course, goes without, or I should say goes with the territory. If anyone has built the Dragon version of the kit, you'll know what I'm talking about, where such things like the jacket over here and even the receiver are a two-part assembly. And when you're building the model version, the builder needs to take some time to polish down these seams as you would on any plastic model. And although some of that was done on these examples over here, being a mass-produced item, a lot of times less emphasis is placed on the seam removal, and that is something that is present on this one here. But I will also wager that the same thing is true for all the other pre-built M2s that I've seen on the market as well from the other manufacturers. So this one over here, looking up close, you do see a slight seam in this section over here, as well as on the reverse side. Now for this section over here, that's not necessarily a ding, because on the real units they would be made out of a forging, and sometimes you do have some forging marks in these areas. And sometimes they do have some pitting on the surface, things like that. So on this section here, that's something that's not necessarily something that could be inaccurate. However, on the receiver over here, we do see some seam work popping through, namely the one right here, and it runs all the way to the back. And yes, sadly, this is something that does hurt the look of the piece. This here should not have any sort of seams on it whatsoever. This entire plate with the fasteners is actually one steel plate that is milled, and so it would be seamless. It would be just one piece of steel. So the seam here is definitely something that does hurt the look. Same is also true for the optic mount area. Again, this would be just one solid piece, and on my own builds, I always spend a little time polishing this section down. But again, this is what happens when you go for pre-built as opposed to a kit form. And same thing here with the bottom. You see the seam right over here. It continues all the way to the back. Again, for this model here, it's quite on par with its other contemporaries. In fact, I'll wager it's one of the better ones on some examples, such as the Hasbro version of the M2HB, where they actually have a surprisingly really decent M2. It's an excellent piece. The one thing about that is that it's not painted. It's just left in its plastic color, and they molded it in a gunmetal type material. Well, obviously, compared to this one here, which is painted and slightly weathered, this one is definitely superior in that regard. As for the 21st Century Toy ones, it's very similar in concept to this one here, painted, weathered, and you do have some slight seams here or there on where the thing got assembled in the factory. So, again, does it hurt the look? Yes, but it's on par with its other contemporaries. So in the end, arguably it's a wash. So the next bit of equipment is this setup that we have here, which is something that was not included with the original Dragon sets. This is something that appears to be totally done by ZY Toys. And as for what this appears to be some kind of a pintle mount. It does have the look and feel of the ones that we see on things like the Humvee, specifically the one that has that MG ring on it. And you tend to see something like this in that type of setup. But what you see here appears to be just a generic pintle mount. So if you're building a vehicle, you want to stick your M2 on it, a little drop of glue, boom, you now have your pintle mount present. As for how it fits in place, well, this guy here just plugs into this fellow just like so. This guy goes into here, and huzzah, you now have an M2 mounted on a pedestal. Now, I'm a bit biased because I do produce pedestal mounts and cradles for the M2. This setup here, in my opinion, is complete fiction, and it's really just there to give you something. Like I stated before, it's close in resemblance to the one we see on Humvees. However, if you're looking for a proper mount, specifically if you're doing something in World War II, this is not it. At best, you'll be able to mount that on a Humvee, but outside of that, if you're mounting this on a tank or a Jeep or anything along those lines, or a Mutt for that matter, yeah, this is definitely not going to fit the bill. So let's go ahead and mount this onto the tripod. So to do that, this fella here just drops into place like so. Find the magic seat spot, and this guy just plugs right in, like so. And now we take the T&E mount. I'm going to go ahead and plug it into the bottom portion here of the M2. It is fairly thin material, so you have to be careful. You could accidentally overpress it and break it, and if that happens, you're going to have to do a little bit of extra repair work, but if I get this guy on right, there we go. And now we have the unit mounted. With the unit fully assembled, as you can see, it has the appropriate look and appearance of a M2HB on an infantry mount. You can again adjust the tripod a little bit. However, with the T&E mount, it appears that it tends to point the unit downward, and in order to compensate that, you have to kind of mess around here with the front tripod leg. It's a bit wonky, but that's what we have here. If you want to improve it further, I guess you can do some plastic surgery where you go ahead and cut this section, drill it out, and have the T&E mount plug into it, which will have the effect of lowering the back, which will raise the front. But that's something that's above the scope of this video. let me go ahead and walk through the ammo portion. So, okay, one thing I mentioned before was the ammo can. So the ammo can, again, it's fully functional and it's nice for what it is. However, one drawback that it does have is some of the colors that are used. The green is perfect, okay, as is the yellow for the information, also spot on. However, the biggest ding that it has is with the color of the handle and the color here of the latch. For some reason, they went with black. That is never the case. From every single ammo can that I've seen, and I've seen hundreds of these things, they're always all single color with the same color of the can itself. So these pieces here should be olive green or olive drab or NATO green or whatever color that they're using at the time. So that's one ding on the ammo can. With the camera zoomed out a little bit further, we could go ahead and compare and contrast the stock ammo can with a real one. So this one here is out of my collection, and it's been seen in a ton of these videos used as a backdrop. Either way, this is a real 50 cal ammo can. This is one that is a recent production, 2006, it says on the side. So hopefully that's what that is. Hopefully I'm not wrong with that. But anyway, this one here is the style of ammo can that's been in production now for about 40 plus, maybe even 50 years at this point. So it's a good one to compare and contrast it to. So here we have the ZY Toys one. Now, one ding with the ZY Toys one is with the shape and geometry here of the lid. The lid, you'll notice on the real one here, is straight, okay? While this one here, it has a slight angle to it. However, this was the case with the ammo cans that were made in the post-World War II time frame from about the late 50s, early 60s. We tend to see those in the Vietnam era. And the idea was that you could pop it open slightly like this, and it could be inside of the cradle mount. And with this type of setup, you could actually have the ammunition coming out, feeding into the weapon, and the ammo is still protected. That design was revised to this one here, where they did away with the angle and they just have the straight line. Now, I do have one with the angle. Unfortunately, it's not in the shop at the moment, but those ones tend to have a deeper lid design than this one over here. And this one kind of has the geometry of the other one, but with the pattern here of the later one. Actually, you know what? Screw it. I'll be right back. Okay, with this fella here on the table, it should really help explain what I was referring to. This one here, by the way, is totally original. It's U.S. military surplus, and the color and everything on it is left original, as are what's inside of it, but that's not really important for this video. What I'm referring to is with the geometry here of the lid. If we compare this with the more modern production unit, you'll see what I'm referring to. This one here has the straight lid going across, while this one here has the angled one. Again, the reason for the angle is so that when you open it up, you can feed the belt through this section over here, but as you can see, it protects the belt and prevents any sort of crap or dirt and debris from getting on the inside, potentially causing a stoppage. This, of course, is very relevant because at some point in time, they decided to move away from this design to the straight design that we have here. Why this is relevant for the 1/6 scale one is, as you can see, it features really aspects of both. We have here the geometry of this fellow, however, the width here of the top portion of the lid is more representative of the modern generation of ammo can. Which, as an interesting point that is, it is definitely a ding on the ammo can itself. Some other things to mention is also with the detailing here on the top lid. So as I mentioned before, it has all these little holes that are representing spot welds that are used to hold a gasket frame in place. However, if we look at the modern version one, you'll see that it does have those dimples, as you can see, but also has these two bigger dimples over here, which are used to offset the space that the hinge section takes up so that you can actually stack these things, and it stacks them up evenly. Also on the bottom, you do have this little slot over here, again, for clearance for the handle. Not to mention, it has this little lip running around here for where the sections of sheet metal were spot welded and folded and bent to shape. On the old school one over here, note it does not have those dimples, but instead it has a rigidity brace right here on the front section, and this offsets the space, which makes the thing still stack up nice and evenly. Still has the same design handle. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And on the bottom portion over here, it also has the exact same groove and press stampings that were mentioned before. Let's look at the 1/6 scale one. As you can see, it's more or less resembling this pattern over here with the 2 braces that are present. However, again, it is missing those details on the bottom portion. The piece, by the way, is a 2-piece assembly, and as you can see, there's a slight seam running on this section over here. Again, quite customarily seen on things that are very similar to this, as I was referencing before. Also, this guy here has this little rectangle present, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe that whoever was designing this probably saw this little section here of paint, probably thought it was a stamping of some sort, so they went ahead and molded it into the top part. Some other things to look at is the hinge section over here, which as you can see is just these 2 little half-round sections for the pin to go through. It does the job with hinging everything properly. If we look at the modern design ammo can, you'll see it has this pattern of hinge over here so that the lid can actually just slide right off. And as for the 60s counterpart, it has the exact same design. Only with, I think, a slightly longer hinge. The hinges are about the same exact size. Same design. Yes, this thing can also pop off with a lateral wiggle of the lid to fully remove it. Obviously, on the model one here, it's completely wrong in that aspect. The hinges, the geometry is totally different, and it's also missing the other detailing. On the front portion over here, the 2 sections are basically identical. We have that little handle, which is used to actually help pull this thing out when you're trying to pull it out of a cabinet of some sort or another. We have the exact same type of latch where it does both. It keeps the thing locked in place, keeping it airtight, and it does a good job of that. And it also has that added benefit of acting as a guard to help protect the belt and prevent any sort of damage from occurring when the ammunition is being fed from the belt, or I should say from the box, into the M2 itself. It has this little hole here with some interesting stampings. On the backs, they look literally identical. Okay, comparing that. Oh, and also the mounting plate here. We have this piece of sheet metal stamping with this hole in the center. And this is used to help, or it's used to keep this little handle in place. And it's also used as a place for this thing to interact with to latch it in the closed position. All right, let's look at the 1/6 scale one. Okay, the 1/6 scale one does have that little handle right over here. It does have the plate. However, you can see that the plate is out of scale. It's slightly too wide compared to the real counterparts. Opening it up, it still operates like the real one. However, if we can, again, take a look at this guy over here. This design is very different compared to the real counterpart in terms of geometry, and also it's missing that large hole that I mentioned before. As for the inner detailing over here, so on the lid portion, get this guy over here, you can see what the interior geometry looks like. We have that pressed stamping that I mentioned before that's used to hold a rubber O-ring in place. We also have this embossed section over here, which is clearance for the handle that rides on the top. Actually, interestingly note, the embossing is not for that. It's just a rigidity stamp over here to help keep the O-ring guide in its appropriate location. This guy here, the exact same design. The only difference again is just the shape here of the lid itself. We compare that to the 1/6 scale one. Obviously, it is definitely lacking. So as you can see in the surprise turn of events, I doubt very much people tuned into this video to get that much in-depth info on 50 cal ammo cans, but as you can see, the ammo can, it's okay, it's nice for what it is, but it definitely does leave lots of room for improvement. However, I will say that the information that we have here on the front section appears to be pretty good. I'm not seeing anything that is awry like the other ammo can from the M240 set, which was meant to be loaded for blanks, which was something that was kind of interesting. But for this one here, the information verbiage appears to be okay. And again, for most people's usage of these things here, it should do the job just fine. But if you are one of those people who like to get into the weeds with this stuff, as you can see, the can here, yeah, it definitely leaves a lot of room for improvement. Back to the M2 itself, one thing I noticed before off camera was that the barrel was a bit canted, almost as if Century Arms built it, but that was more likely because the thing was sitting in this box now for over 10 years. It was a simple fix. I basically just went ahead and torqued the unit slightly, just with my hand, just applying a little bit of pressure on it, just a little bit here and there, and that was enough to straighten everything out, and now, more or less, the barrel is nice and true. Just a little bit more here and there, and I think it should be good to go. But it appears to be good enough for government work. Okay, so with that out of the way, the next thing I want to do is to compare and contrast this with an actual Dragon unit. As I mentioned before, and several times in this video, this thing here is based, or is just essentially a rebox of Dragon tooling. And I actually do have some receipts. However, I do not have the actual infantry-mounted version of the built Dragon M2 to compare and contrast with this one here. I have the next best thing. You see, I did build several versions of the kit version of the Dragon M2, and those were used on several of my 1/6 scale American tank builds that have been seen on the channel. Well, coming off of one of them, namely my M26 Pershing, is this set that we have right here. This one here is a legit Dragon M2 plastic kit version that was built up and mounted onto an M23 cradle. The M23 cradle is from Armor Packs, and that's not really the topic of this video. But I do have the other accessories that go with it, such as the tripod, the T&E mount, the T&E mount bracket, as well as also the yoke. The set also, of course, came with the ammo can. However, I never built it because, obviously, this is not a World War II pattern, and for an M26 Pershing, I needed the World War II counterpart. So that one is still on its runner somewhere in the shop. One day I'll probably get to it, build it up, just for the sake of having one assembled. But for the purposes of this video, we can actually go ahead and compare the Dragon unit with the ZY Toys, and there actually is a bit of a plot twist in regards to some of the other parts that I even wasn't expecting. So let's start with the M2 itself. Okay, here's the Dragon one. This one here I built a number of years ago, and I actually did the seam removal work on it like I was referencing before. However, pop this guy off here. You can see that it is literally the exact same tooling. The barrel shrouds, wrench slits. Note on the cooling, or on the carry handle cooling jacket section, how the holes are the way they are molded. Now on the top portion here, it goes flat because of the way that you have to do that for injection moldings. Note the geometry here of the carry handles are identical, in that they are both wrong, admittedly. But the Dragon one does have this little extra bit of equipment here with this little tube in this section, while the ZY Toys ones, that is absent. Note the charging handle geometry being the oval. The spade grip sections. The top cover. The top cover interior. Only it's a little bit stiffer on this one compared to the kit one. But as you can see, it is literally the exact same tooling. The feed paw area. The charging handle is a little bit different. As you can see, this is actually made with a different type of mold compared to the Dragon one. The Dragon one is a little bit better with the fastener. It has the castle nut detailing there, while it's absent on the ZY Toys one. That's an interesting little change. The charging handles. Only this one here I actually added a spring to it, but it's probably seized with all the layers of paint and age of this unit here. But regardless, it does still work, and it is exactly the same. The rear sight. And also the trigger sections. clearly it is the exact same tooling for the receiver. However, where the plot thickens is with the tripod. So here we have the ZY Toys tripod, as I referenced before. Note on the legs, they have that nice little slot that is milled in so that the pieces cannot rotate. And also note that the feet do not have a rigidity bulkhead in these sections here. Well, if we compare it to the Dragon one, we'll just build it as we fly it. If we compare this to the Dragon one is completely different tooling. So this one here is a completely new, fresh mold. Compared to the Dragon one, it's a little bit smaller. The diameter on the tubes are also much smaller. And just the whole unit itself seems to be smaller in dimensions compared to the Dragon counterpart. Also, the Dragon one does have the detailing of that latch here on the side, and you need this because this is actually how you lock the M2 on the yoke to the tripod itself. It's a nice little latch. Stick it in, slap it down, and it locks it in place. It's present here on this version. The Dragon one also has a nice little ratchet type system where we have these little teeth and grooves and they all lock into each other with tension and helps prevent the piece from drooping down. It's similar to this design over here. He does have that. However, this one has the added edge of having an actual metal fastener that's used to hold it in place, which gives it a little bit more strength. While this one here is just depending on the tension here of the plastic. It does do a decent job with holding it up, but admittedly this one here is a bit more robust. But on the flip side, this one's more accurate because we actually have the appropriate shaped fastener as opposed to this guy here where it's literally just a Phillips screw. Also on the feet itself, you'll notice on this one here it has the little leg while this one does not. You will also see the locking detailing right here. It's also a separate molded piece like it is on the ZY Toys one. The little spring latch detailing is also just integrally molded on. They are non-functional. They're just there for looks. The piece is fully functional on the Dragon, as you can see. One nice thing about the Dragon is that on the little bar over here, there are little tick marks for the graduations, as these things are numbered, and you can actually adjust the angle, and there are some mathematics in this section over here, while on this one here, that is not the case, and it is totally smooth. The other difference, I should say the one improvement that the ZY Toys one has over the Dragon is with the feet. So on this one here, the feet are actually adjustable, as you can see. However, this one has a nice feature where it has that groove in the bottom section, while this one, it does not. And because of that, this one here will have the habit of pivoting on you in this manner here. You have to basically manually just adjust it so that it fits nice and straight. While this one here, because of that little tongue and groove thing, it will never wobble on you. So that is definitely interesting to point out. The other thing is with the yoke. Yoke appears to be similar to the ZY Toys one, but it is definitely a completely new design. You can see how much robust the pintle section is compared to the one on the ZY Toys one. And in my opinion, this one here is the more accurate one. It just has the geometry of the ones that I've seen even have in my collection. On the T&E mount, let's take a look at this guy over here. This appears to be the exact same tooling as the ZY Toys one. So ZY Toys kept the Dragon T&E adapter for the rear section of the receiver. So that is exactly the same. However, the T&E mount itself is different. So here we have the Dragon one. And here's the ZY Toys one. Obviously, completely different. It's all fresh tooling. The other change that ZY Toys added was a huge benefit, and that is the ammo belt. So as I mentioned before, the Dragon kit does supply you with an ammo belt. However, the ammo belt was just a standard injection molded polystyrene chunk. It was the exact same length that we have here, but it was just molded as a solid piece of plastic. If memory serves some of the other Dragon kits, namely the 1919 and their 1917 sets, the ammo belt is also supplied. However, it is a piece of DS-styrene, which is flexible, which is a better choice of material for that medium. This is actually quite similar to the iHeart Kit SG43 kit that I also did a review on, where the ammo belt was supplied and it was also molded in standard plastic. This one here, they went with a set that is much more of a wiser choice, which is an actual real linked belt, and that is fantastic. Again, the only thing that needs to be done is just paint the projectiles and you'll actually be good to go. So now that I've went through all of that, I'm going to go ahead, get the unit assembled, and let's see what it looks like with the thing in its final form. After a little bit of fiddling, here we have the unit fully assembled. This also includes the little lock levers that I mentioned before, and these went on without any sort of hand fitting. It's funny because it is literally a square peg in a round hole, but the tolerances are the point where you just do a little bit of careful wiggling and the piece does slide in. I didn't have any sort of problems with breakages or anything like that, and perhaps maybe the planets did align on me. But if you are having a little difficulty and you're a bit heavy-handed, perhaps maybe a little bit of material removal would probably be a good idea. But they're in nice and tight. There's no need to add a little drop of glue because I don't see them coming out anytime soon. The belt itself went in without any sort of problems. And I essentially just loaded it as you would a real one. So the belt just clips in. I'm able to get the belt to fit into the chamber area, or into the feet area, I should say. I was able to close the top cover, and it didn't inhibit the thing at all in any way. Go ahead and rack it twice. Unfortunately, it doesn't actually work, but it's still pretty fun cool to do that on these Brownings, regardless of scale. The one thing that I do want to mention is that when you are loading the belt, and one of these ZY Toys ones, is that you want to make sure that the belt is this version over here, and it's not the one with the loop hanging off of the edge. The reason why this is relevant is because with the loop the way it is, it tends to snag up on the inside over here and it'll inhibit you from closing the top cover, or at least it did for me on this example here. So if I open up the can, you can see the loop that I'm referring to right over there. It's also important to mention that for a while, they were actually also selling the belts as a little baggie of parts where you could actually buy a 100-round belt in pieces and you actually have to physically assemble each one, which if anyone's ever done the real one before, it's actually doable, and it's kind of funny that they actually did it and it came out perfect. Another also thing to mention is that for a while there was another option out there for 50 cal ammo 1/6 scale from DID, where it was essentially the exact same type of tooling for the rounds. However, the belt was replicating the cloth belt as opposed to the disintegrating link one. Those are really, really cool. Unfortunately, they only did one production batch those, and I want to say 2006 or so. And it's one of those things that they were on the market for a while, and once they dried up, they dried up. But you may encounter one floating around at a swap meet or on eBay or things like that. And if you ever encounter one, it's actually a good buy because they're really high quality. In fact, they're better than the MG itself. But the problem with the belt, the link, or I should say the cloth belt, is I believe because of the tolerances of the cloth, trying to fit it into a receiver here was much more difficult, and it was always wanting to push up on the top cover. The disintegrating link belt here is much lower profile, and as you can see, I'm able to have the piece close without any sort of problems. Also, like I was referencing before, now it's all wonky, but I also went ahead and have the ammo can, as you see, in the appropriate setup where it's open slightly ajar with the latch over there covering up that little section. It's also acting as a tensioner. Again, a lot of times these things are used in a cradle, and when that's the case, they are much closer in proximity to the M2, and this little lever, this little latch over here acts as a nice little bridge, as you can see right there how close the proximity is, and again, it's used to protect the belt. It also adds a bit of tension if I'm not mistaken. But if you are rendering this type of setup, this is technically the appropriate way to do it, but it's not uncommon to see these things also with the thing just wide open like that too. So your mileage may vary. Me, personally, I like to have it in this type of format because, well, it's just, I don't know, it's just the way I prefer doing it. Either way, you have some artistic licensing available to you. And either way, it looks really good. It'll look even better if you go ahead and paint the projectiles with a little swipe of copper paint. And you could also then paint the tips replicating either tracer or armor piercing. Tracer would, I believe, be red, and armor piercing would be black. And there is a sequence on which one gets painted where, and that could easily be found online. As for this setup over here, I'm going to leave it in the following format, just again as archival reasons, just so I could have it in my collection in the following format. So, in the end, what are my thoughts on the ZY Toys M2? I obviously love this unit. It's probably, again, even in this day and age, one of the best options for an M2 in 1/6 scale. The thing is compatible with all of the EastCoastArmory.com cradle mounts, be it from the D mount to the E mount to even another mount that I have coming out. All of those are compatible with this setup over here. And if you're just looking for just a standard infantry mounted M2 for your action figure display, it's absolutely perfect. If you're looking for a vehicle mounted unit, it's also really good. And the fact that they give you this type of pintle mount over here is very helpful in that regard if you're on a budget, or if you want to swap it out again for something that's a bit higher fidelity. That can be done with the ZY Toys. The units are excellent. I'm not sure if they're still in production. I hope they are, because they were a great piece. And again, you just can't go wrong with a Browning M2, regardless of scale. It would be really cool one day to have a comparison of all the other 1/6 scale M2s side by side, to have a nice little compare and contrast and a little shootout between the two on who has the better M2. But that remains to be seen. That will hopefully be another topic for another video for another day. But that's out of the scope of this video. And with that, that wraps up this 1/6 scale product review video for the ZY Toys Browning M2HB. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to this channel, where it's a phenomenal way to keep up to date on new posted content, being 1/6 scale product review videos like this one over here, or my other type of content being 1/6 scale project update videos and smaller scale model tank videos when they frequently get posted. Another way to keep in loop with new posted content is by liking us on Facebook. There I have more photographs of all of the larger and smaller scale builds that have been seen on this channel in the past. And furthermore, don't forget to swing by EastCoastArmory.com for more 1/6 and 1/16 scale builds and detail components. Thanks again. I'll be seeing you all again on the next one. See you there.